Welcome everybody to today's webinar. I see we've just going to give it another minute before we start because I see lots of people entering. It's going up quickly. We're sitting on 65 people so far. We've had over 200 people register for today's webinar, so we'll just give it another couple of minutes just to give people time to join. So we have now 67 people. I think we're going to get started. Welcome to today's webinar. Thanks very much for joining. I see people from around the world are with us today. And we're obviously honored to have Massimo and Senait present on this very important topic, how to put a collection together. My name is Joshua. I'll be the moderator today and obviously posing questions to the panelists towards the end of the webinar. We expect it to be roughly about 45 minute presentation by Senait and by Massimo, followed by a Q&A. We will try and get to all of your questions as much as we can, but if we don't, we'll try and do so after the webinar. You may know, for those of you who are unfamiliar with webinars, you haven't joined before, there is a Q&A tab and a chat function at the bottom. So if you'd like to make any comments as the webinar is going on, please use the chat function. If you want to ask any questions, please pose them in the Q&A box. And as I said, we'll try and get to most of them before the end of the webinar today, if not afterwards. As you may see on my screen, it's quite small from where I'm sitting. We do have the trade show, which is coming up, which will take place on the 23rd and 24th of October at the Mall of Africa. Prior to that, there are the fashion shows, which happen from the 20th to the 22nd of October. For the fashion shows, you can buy tickets from the end of September on Quickets. And if you are interested in attending the trade show, you do need to be a trade buyer or media. Registration for this will open in the next week. We have already sold 70% of the stands. So if you're a designer and you're interested, you can get in touch with Hannah Lee, who is on this webinar. She'll be putting in the comments section her email address if you are interested in inquiring about a stand. So without further ado, I think we'll get into it. I'd like to introduce our two panelists and speakers for today. Senait, with 12 years of experience within the fashion industry in buying and wholesaling with Burberry, Matthew Williamson, Pringle, and Joseph, Senait moved into teaching in 2015. As the academic course leader of the BA Business, BA Buying, and BA Communication courses, creating a culture of innovation is a key pillar on her business courses that she runs and manages. In June 2021, Senait won the award of the most talented Italians under 40 in the UK by the Italian Embassy and Italian Chamber of Commerce for the UK. In September 2022, Senait will have her first TEDx talk on SDG number 5 by the UN, a topic of gender equality in Fiesole in Italy. Now I'd like to introduce Massimo. Massimo Casagrande was a designer for Versace, Versace Men, Versace Sport, and Versace Jeans, and then launched his own label, MCG Massimo Casagrande, in 2012. His collections have been shown in Paris and London as part of the Fashion East Menswear installations. Massimo has been an official partner of the London Design Festival and has collaborated on projects with companies such as the English National Ballet, Laura Biagiotti, WGSN, Erdem, and Burberry on design and research skills, as well as developing graphic and branding expertise. You can see from this slide some of the logos of the other associations and organizations he's done work with. With that, I'd like to hand over to Massimo and tonight, and we look forward to hearing from you all as we go through this. As I said, please do use the Q&A and the comments section if you've got questions or comments during the course of the webinar.
Okay, thank you, Joshua, for the introduction. Hello, everyone in South Africa. I'm Massimo, as Josh mentioned. I'm live, streaming live from Paris. Tonight is in London. And we're really honored to be able to speak with you guys all today and to talk about how to be responsible designers and how to put together a cohesive collection to be able to sell for the retail world. Also, we are really looking forward to being in Johannesburg in person in October. So we are going to physically be there in real life. And we look forward to meeting you all and also doing some workshops when we're there. Before we start the webinar, we just wanted to give an overview of what is happening. Sort of there's a changing of a guard that's happening at the moment. And just to sort of put things into perspective, how we are all adjusting to new realities, thanks also to the pandemic and what we've just been through. So I want to start off with a quote from Remo Ruffini of Montclair, where he says that the world is changing. People do not want the same things as before. They demand and expect more from brands. Today, we must find new ways to connect, engage, and become pioneers of new messages. And I highlighted those words because I think that's being a responsible designer, creating a collection for retail is what it's all about. It's about being able to connect, to engage, but also pioneering the industry. We're at a point now where the fashion industry really needs to change and evolve. An overview of the consumer expectations for 2022. As I've mentioned, there's been lots of changes and innovations, and this has led things to be done differently. Industries, not only fashion, but also other industries, are starting to be doing things differently. But we're also noticing that consumers are starting to purchase and starting to buy in a different way. So how do we, in a creative field, how do we as designers, how do we come up and sort of serve the needs and the demands of the consumers, but at the same time respecting the environmental and the social responsibilities that come with that? Also here, I just wanted to show how the consumer has actually changed thanks to the pandemic. So we can see these numbers. And what's I find really important is that 68% of consumers are searching for retailers with a strong environmental, social, and governance initiatives. So that's very, very important. As we can see, we need, we as a fashion industry really need to change, and we need to do something because we are respecting the demand of what the consumer wants. So at the end of the day, retailers and designers must figure out how we can reset to meet the needs of the consumers, but at the same time, how do we become better corporate citizens? How can we lead by example and show how the industry can change? And how can you become a better designer, a more environmental conscious and a more responsible designers? And not only designers, but the retailers as well. We should embrace this current disruption. And we need to, it's our commitment to pivot this new change towards the future, to find a resolution towards the future to become more responsible. I came across an article the other day, which is it's on a platform which is called Eye on Design. And this quote stuck out. And actually, they were talking about product design and all other type of design, but I find that it's very relevant also to fashion design. The quote was, "Today's design is shaped by likes." And that's a problem. Design has become intertwined with the most harmful dynamics of social media. And I think social web. And I think, that's actually true. We're living in a digital age now where what we're doing is we sharing our work on the web and on social media. We are being evaluated. We've got this, people have got lots of opinions. We've got Diet Prada and all other things. We're starting to notice that there's a similarity of design work from one designer to the next. We tend to be sort of all going in the same direction. We're sort of remixing patterns and trends that have been created. We're trying to replicate and emulate what somebody else is doing. And, and we're doing this why? At the end of the day, people are doing this because, like in our personal lives, we want to get likes, we want to get views, we want to have retweets, and we want comments, we want engagement. This is what is known as performative design. Okay. But performative design, unfortunately, actually reduces the process of creativity. It's not about problem solving skills. It's just sort of reproducing something that is already out there. And as fashion designers, I understand we need to follow trends that are happening within the world. We're all following the same zeitgeist. We're all being influenced by the same thing. But also at the same time, we need to create uniqueness in what is happening and not replicate what others are doing. We mustn't just mimic something just because it's trending, it's cool, or it's popular. Hence, we need to transform performative design into responsible design. So now we're going to be looking at what does it actually mean to be a responsible designer and what steps we need to take to create a responsible collection. First of all, I want to start off with the Pareto ratio, which I'm sure many of you know, especially in the business field. It means that 80% of your turnover will come from 20% of the products that you sell. Now, in fashion, this is more impactful because studies have shown that consumers, so people like me, like you, we only wear 20% of our wardrobe 80% of the time, which means we have a lot of waste in there. And what happens is all of these end up either in landfills or, in discounted prices and sales. And that's a lot, only using 20% of our entire wardrobe. It's actually quite scary what's happening. So what do we need to do? We need to change the mindset, of the past few decades where fast fashion has become the norm. Maybe we need to stop overproducing items or creating garments without really understanding the need. What does the consumer really want? And most important, we need to stop following the fake trends and the fake hypes that are happening out there. Like I said, we see somebody do something else and we just want to copy it to make sure to get that sale. What we need to do as responsible designers is to create fewer but more targeted products. And this will lead to more sales, less waste, and possibly reduce the discounting that's happening in the stores. Responsible design, which is different to what performative design is, it's a process of creation and problem solving. It's also showing that there are opportunities to change the current process and to create bigger value to the fashion industry. It also enhances a lot and supports the practice and the concept of sustainability. Senait and I are big supporters of sustainability and responsible design. We both try to implement as much as possible the UN guidelines of sustainability. They have the different pillars. We integrate that in the work that we do. We integrate that with the companies that we work with, and above all, we integrate that in the teaching that we do as well. Why? Because we need to rethink and redesign in a positive way. Because responsible design, at the end of the day, creates a healthier, more sustainable, and more responsible world. Okay, we need to start really thinking about reducing the global environmental impacts. It enhances social benefits through all design disciplines. And, that adds a layer of appropriate consideration for positive impacts. Now, responsible design, I know we're going to be talking about how to put a collection together, but responsible design also means inclusivity. And inclusivity means sizing. It means taking consideration of people with disabilities, all different types of consumers. That is what a responsible designer is. And I can list two brands, which I think are a great example of inclusivity. One is called Unhidden by Victoria Jenkins, where she actually creates, she herself has got disabilities and she creates garments based, for people with various disabilities. And then there's Chromat, which is a New York brand where they actually create garments for all different body size, for transgender, for non-binary people. So this is responsible design. It's becoming inclusive and really taking, every single person into consideration. We're designing for human beings. There's no exceptions. Okay. This is what I want to highlight about, I'm sure we've seen this so many times, 60% off, 40% off. It was $32.99, now it's $22.99. Lots of times we go onto these websites where we see all these prices highlighted in red. Why is this happening? This is happening because what we are doing is we are just trying to follow the fake trends and the hype that is out there. We are not actually designing something that is targeted towards our specific consumer. So all of these things end up in discounted prices, they end up in sales. What doesn't get sold ends up in land waste. So as responsible designers, we need to start, we need the approach of getting consumers. I know it's a contradiction, but we want them to buy less, but we want them to buy better. So consumers, like now that they will be making more purchasing decisions based on sustainability. What they want is more sustainable items that they will be able to reuse when possible. Resale is a big thing that's happening at the moment. Lots of luxury brands are entering into the resale market. Repair is something that is very important as well. It's responsible. We've got brands like Patagonia and Levi's who actually, if your denim is broken or product is broken, they send you the repair kit or they repair it for you. When it's, when they have like Amazon Prime Day or Black Fridays, Patagonia actually advertises in the newspaper saying, don't buy, repair. So, responsible design isn't only about the making of the product, but it's something that continues beyond the purchase of the product. We need to think beyond. Once I've bought the product, what happens afterwards? So during the conceptual stage of the collection, we as designers, we need to ask ourselves, what I'm designing, what impact will this product have on the environment? What can be done to lessen that impact? And what is a responsible way of creating this product? So, it's our job to become eco-conscious designers, where we have to completely understand the journey of the product from conception to once it ends up in the consumer's hand. So we need to know, where do our textiles come from? Where, like the surrounding ecologies, where are they being created? Is everything, up to norm? Are there certifications that can support that the textile I'm buying is sustainable? Are there corporate social responsibilities in place within the factories, within the manufacturers? How are the products made? How are they disposed? But most important, when we design, we also need to think, this product, once my consumer has worn this product, once I've worn the shirt, how can this be used, or how can this be turned into a second or sometimes even a third life? We need to start thinking now, with all the recycling that we're doing, how can we extend the lifespan of the fibers, of the textiles, of the garments? And there's lots of companies like EON or Source Mapping that are really aiming and working a lot to do this. Levi's has teamed up with a Swedish company, and they created they've actually managed to recycle denim. They've managed to recycle denim and created a whole new denim, which is called Renew Cell. And they've actually redesigned the 504s, and they can be recycled and, and recreated many times possible. And that's I think it's a great achievement, especially since denim is one of the biggest, causes of pollution within the industry. So now let's look at how we start creating a cohesive collection. How do we start putting things into practice as a designer? So most important, we all have our brand, but we need to have a signature style. We need to have an identity. We need to have a DNA. Each and every one of us are unique, okay? But this signature style, it needs to be consistently present and recognizable a long time. If I talk to you about Chanel, if I talk to you about Dior, if I talk to you about Versace, immediately you know what I'm talking about, because it's a very strong brand identity. So you need to establish that. You need to make sure that you have a consistent style, that this DNA is going to be shown across each collection. No matter what trend you're going to be focusing on for the following season, we need to make sure that your signature style is there. If I see Chanel in the 1920s, in the 1980s, and today I can see a consistent narrative. I can see the DNA. I can see how it's done. So once you've identified and you know what your signature style is, you can fine tune it and evolve it every season, so you can keep up with what is happening outside with the markets, but it'll be unique because it still reflects who you are. Also, having a signature style, it makes you stand out from an oversaturated and competitive market. There are lots of brands out there. Remember what we said before about performative design. We want to move away from that. We want people to recognize us for ourselves. So it's very, very, very important for you to be able to identify your signature style. And most important, once you have a signature style, it strengthens the value of your brand. It becomes recognizable. Instantly, you will see someone down the street and say, that is a Chanel or a Dior, So it's very, very important to have that. Here's just some examples. I put Chanel and Armani. Again, you can see. So, we've got Chanel herself. There's a picture of her in the early 30s. And then two contemporary collections. With Armani, it's the same. There's a picture, the woman with the sunglasses is in the 80s. And the last picture on the right is last year. But yet you can see that, over like 50 decades or 30 years, the style, the signature style is relevant. You can recognize what it is. So it's very, very important. You evolve it. Each season you evolve it, but you have to make sure you have your signature style. What's really interesting is, and this is something that we will cover once we come to South Africa in October, that these theories of modernity were actually written by these people back in the 19th century. Look, you got Baudelaire from 1821, Stéphane Mallarmé from, all these people, they actually, we base our signature style, we base the theories of modernity on the writings that they did, because they were able to categorize people into different sections and come up with different theories. So for example, a brand following a Baudelaire would be fixed aesthetics. So those would be brands like Chanel, Armani, Dior. Brands who follow the theories of Mallarmé are looking for absolute newness. So that would be, for example, Balenciaga or Vetements, where they completely change and distort what the brand is, and they really replicate what is happening now. So they're looking at absolute newness. They try and reflect what's happening within the society. And brands who follow Walter Benjamin, they're more into a hybrid style, which is almost like this mix and mash, this pastiche, this collage. And a good example of that would actually be Alessandro Michele Fugucci. So you can see how, even though these theories were written 200 years ago, they are so important that they really reflect society today. So I would suggest maybe to look at some of these names, look at some of these peoples, and understand, the methodology behind their theories and how can that apply to your signature style. So as a brand, you have the option. You can either do multiple products or you can offer a single product. Most of the most important companies actually started off with one product. If we look at Vuitton, it started off with trunks. Prada is another example. When it was started in 1910, they were just making bags. And then Miuccia expanded into clothing line. So, so sometimes designing smaller collections help, maybe focusing on one specific product. Once you become known for that type of product, you can then slowly expand. If you want to create maybe something a bit bigger, with multiple products or multiple offerings, what you can do is design maybe smaller, adaptable, interchangeable, and consumer-focused collections. A very, very good example of this is actually one of Donna Karan's collections that came out in 1985, which was called 7 Easy Pieces. And this was, if you can find the video on YouTube, it's absolutely amazing. You had 8 models that came out wearing a bodysuit, a black bodysuit and black tights. And then as they walked, they put on different products. So they were actually able to create, they put on a skirt, they put on a white shirt, they put on a jacket. They were actually able to adapt and interchange these 8 bodies into 8 different looks. And I think, if you look at the consumer today, if you look at society today, this concept of adaptability and interchangeable pieces is very much aligned with the contemporary consumer. That's what we want. We want to become a bit more contemporary. And also retailers and buyers, and Senait will go into more detail with this afterwards as well, is that's what they're looking for. They want to make sure that, you can match those pieces with something else. Here's just an example of the Donna Karan on the left. and the Prada nylon bag, which she started off with. And actually 3 years ago now, they've relaunched the nylon bags. They've called it Re-Nylon, and they're actually creating nylon from fishing nets that come from the lakes in Africa. They're turning them into nylon, and they've created a whole new range, and they've reproposed the nylon bag, the nylon range. So it's very interesting to take a look at as well. We also need to understand when we're designing the collection that, you know, we have this triptych of consumers, and sometimes we forget. As designers, we tend to think, I like this, I'm going to design this, and it's going to sell. But unfortunately, that's not the reality. It's the consumer who dictates us, you know. So we have the vision, we have the idea, the style, but we have to base it also on the needs of the consumer. But you need to keep in mind when you're designing a collection or when you're starting a collection or a brand, is that you have these three typologies of consumer. You have the consumer who is completely new, who is unaware of your brand and your product. So, you know, they're completely off your radar. They don't know who you are. You have people who kind of know you, they've read about you, they've seen something, but they've never bought anything from you yet. And then you have the consumer who at least has made one purchase from you. So these three types of consumers, you know, you need to consider these three types of consumers when you're designing your collection, because you need to capture their attention, you need to gain their trust, and convert maybe the first two typologies into the third one. And we need to get the third one to actually come back again. So, you know, so you need to start considering your price points as well, how to attract a wider audience. It doesn't mean you have to make things cheaper, depending where you position yourself. But what's most important is if you know who your target market is and you know who your target customers are, you'll be able to create a range that will attract the different types of customers. And again, you know, we always talk about pen portraits, we always do market research, but the more we know about how they live, what their needs and habits are, the more we can design products which are inclusive, sustainable, and ethical. Like I said, 80-20% ratio. You know, we want to make sure that our collection sells. We don't want to overproduce. We want to reduce the number of unsold or discounted products that end up in landfills, okay? And as I mentioned, we need to really think about being inclusive to a 360-degree level. We really need to identify the body shapes, the sizes, and focus on people with disabilities as well. Okay. So when we're looking at the product range, you know, we need to think of the collection as a whole. People always ask how many pieces, how many looks. I would say if you're just starting, maybe a minimum 12, maybe, you know, 30, something small. Don't really go big. But the process is always the same. You're going to have, you know, for your range, you're going to have an inspiration, you're going to have a theme. But what's most important is we need to think of, you know, when we're designing, we need to think of what is going to be sort of your core, your classic piece, and what is going to be your seasonal piece. Your classic piece, we'll see afterwards, is almost like the bestseller, is something that you can repropose each season with minor little changes. So the Burberry trench, you know, it's a classic, or like the Max Mara coat. But what's important is, you know, that designing a fashion collection or creating a range, it's an evolution, not a revolution. You do not want to change your look or your narrative every single season, because that means you are not following your signature style, you're not following your brand DNA, and you're going to be losing your consumer. Collections must look like families. So when you're designing, you need to make sure we have to be able to see how all the products work together. And also, you know, with your collections, successful brands are successful because they know how to create a product range where they make sure that the consumer will come back next season and continue buying stuff. Because at the end of the day, like I've highlighted there, separates. None of us wear one designer head to toe anymore. So we want to be able to purchase pieces that we can incorporate, that we can adapt and interchange into our existing wardrobe. So, you know, so also put yourself in the position of a buyer. If you had a store, what would you buy from your collection? You know, what you have designed, And sometimes it's not easy being brutally honest with yourself. And sometimes you have to bite the bullet and say, you know what, this isn't going to work. So you need to learn how to edit. And if you feel you can't do that yourself, ask somebody else to do it for you, because that's the only way as well. You need to understand what will a retailer buy and what will they not buy. Here's just some examples I put of where you can see how we design in families. And you can see by the images, we've got the inspiration, but then we can see how by looking at the pictures, we created different products that reflect that narrative, that story. The products are interchangeable amongst themselves. Even if you look at the bottom one where it says, please don't bite, we've got the color version. We can see that there's this coherent, cohesive collection happening in terms of shapes, fabrics, and volume. So that's very, very, very important that you need to consider. So what do we put in the product range? Now, this is just a quick overview. Senite will go in much more detail, but you need to sort of divide your collection into these three pieces. First of all, you're going to have the statement piece. The statement piece is always the bold one. It's the wow factor. It's what's on the catwalk, what's going to be printed in the newspaper, what maybe Lady Gaga might wear to the Red Oscars, or Timothée Chalamet will wear at the Venice Film Festival. The best sellers are, like I said, is maybe your core, the pieces that, each season sell really well, but what you will do is you might tweak them to match what the trend of the season is happening. And these usually fall in the middle of your collection range. Obviously, your statement piece is the most expensive one, okay? And then you've got the add-on pieces. The add-on pieces can be something as simple as maybe a cardigan, a t-shirt, or something which is at a lower price entry, but it makes it more accessible. It could be sort of the entry point for the person who has never purchased from you before to actually introduce them to your brand, for them to become part of your world. And again, don't be too ambitious. Don't look at other designers and say, oh my God, they've got 300 pieces. I need to design 300 pieces. Every brand, and we need to consider that every brand is at a different stage in their business. So you need to focus on your own needs and what you can actually accomplish. Do you have the right budget? Have you got the manufacturers? So these are all things that you have to take into consideration. Don't fall under the peer pressure where you have to, or the FOMO, or where you have to do so many pieces because that's what's happening. Focus on yourself, on your signature style, and again, focus on versatility. You have to think of your three consumers, okay? You have to maybe think of sizing. Do you scale things up? Do you scale things down? Think of colorways, think of materials, think of options, and create products that customers will come back. Maybe, I go to the same brand and maybe each year or each season I buy a different shirt, which I can put with the denim that I bought from them before. It's the add-on, it's the adaptability. You want them to come and buy these add-on pieces from the brand so they become loyal. The most important thing of what we want is for them to become repeat buyers. So this is the final checklist that you need to create, or that you need to look at when you're creating a collection that you want to sell, that you want to be able to be successful. So work out what defines your signature style. Bottega Veneta, it's the weaving. Burberry, it's the trench. Prada, it's the nylon. Hermes, we know what it is. So also what sets you apart from other brands and the other competitors? What are your current best-selling products? And again, remember the 20-80 rule. How much of your best-selling products is actually being sold? Maybe you might have to reduce them. So consider that as well. And what are, how profitable are your services? Okay. How much are you actually spending? Are your best sellers really that profitable? Because maybe even though they're selling a lot, it's actually costing you more to make them. So you're not really earning much from them as well. Edit, edit, edit. What can be taken away? Or maybe sometimes what can be added to make the collection more cohesive? Okay. Remember, we're talking about narratives. We're telling stories. Also try and see what are the gaps in your current collection? What is the white space out there that you feel that your brand can actually capture and create that other people aren't doing? And again, families, does it merchandise well? Will a buyer be able to buy various pieces? And from those various pieces, are those various pieces going to be strong enough to actually represent your brand inside a retail space? And then lastly, does your collection have the statement piece, the bestseller, and the add-on piece? So these are elements that you need to consider when you're putting together a collection. So now I will actually pass you over to Sanait, who will start talking about the range planning in more detail. And then at the end, we're going to have some questions and answers to all your questions. So I leave you to Sanait now.
Thank you, Massimo. Thanks. So I'm going to start the second part of the presentation. As Massimo was anticipating, my part is on range planning. So, considering my experience here at Istituto Marangoni and also my background in the industry, I look at the range plan as one of the most important elements when you are launching a new brand, when you are an entrepreneur and you want to try to find your way in the market with your fashion collection. So, why the range plan is so important? First of all, what is the range plan? So range plan is very important, and I like to consider the range plan as a sort of skeleton of any collection. Looking at the range plan in a strategic way means that you will know the number of the styles that you're having in your collection. You will know the proportion of the style types. So how much will be the percentage of the dresses, of your outerwear, of the separates, the knits. And you really need to look at all of these different product categories as a very good way for then approaching buyers, so retailers, because first of all, you will need to have your collection both from buyers and from retailers. And then these product categories are also very important when you're trying to approach the final consumers. Then range plan are also important because they can help you to understand how to allocate the fabrics. Don't forget that if in a collection you have 7, 8 types of fabrics, it means that you will need to find suppliers, you will need to find factories. So having in your skeleton, so having in your range plan a clear breakdown of how many fabrics will be part of the collection for that season is very important. Then range plan is also useful because they can help you to group styles. So Massimo was using the expression of families. So that is referred the group of styles. And then probably one of the most important point, range plan can really help you to find the balance between the commercial and the creative side in your collection. I think to achieve this target is one of the most ambitious things from any designers. And probably if you also start working for companies, that is the classical question when you're meeting your merchandise team, when you're meeting your production development team. These were the conversation also in big companies where I work, like Burberry. There was always this question: how can you ensure that you can find the perfect balance between the commercial element and the creative element of your season, of your collection? Before talking more into details about the range plan, a quick revision about the seasons. So how many range plans you will need, thinking about the buying calendar, thinking about the retailers. So in general, looking at the buying calendar, the buyers, they will buy, so they will invest money into fall season, so 2 pre-collections and 2 main collections. Then obviously it depends from the size of the business, of the brand. Some brands, when they are at the early stage of the development, they have just 2 seasons, so autumn, winter, and spring, summer. And then as soon as they start growing, as soon as the range plan is growing, later on we're going to be analyzing the example of Christopher Kane that started with 2 seasons at the beginning when it was just a simple independent brand. And then as soon as Kering bought 48% of the company, then Christopher Kane started having also the pre-collections in the offer for the season that they were selling. So the range plan is also important because it can help to have a control of your range. Don't forget that having a big range means that you will need to put in place an effective supply chain management with your production manager, and you will need to develop and follow and taking care of all the factories that they will be involved for the range. So the range plan can also help to avoid an overdevelopment of the collection. And then also having the range plan clear, that is a sort of skeleton of a collection, can help to have this commercial delivery that is planned and it's clear and it's part of the pyramid of the offer for the season. Now, when you're looking at the range plan and how to build an effective range plan, you can look at different types of data that can help you. First of all, you will be looking at the sales coming from the previous season. Looking at the numbers, looking at the figures is definitely a very good practice. And when I say looking at the numbers and looking at the figures, you will try to understand which were the key products that you sold in the previous season. So if you sold more outwear versus knitwear, if you sold more day wear versus evening wear. So all of these numerical data can help you on how to build an effective, profitable and commercial range plan for the new season. Then you will be also, as a designer, you'll be looking at some financial, merchandising and logistic considerations. The logistic considerations are mainly linked to what I was discussing before. So how to manage your supply chain, where your production will be located. So these are the key questions that are part of the conversation when you are developing a range plan. Then you will be looking at the sell-through of the previous season. And these sell-through data are coming from your buyer. So also if you have an online presence from your e-commerce, so really understanding how much you sold can help you for the strategy behind an effective range plan. Then you will also look at some predictions in terms of consumer behavior changes. Massimo was discussing a lot about responsible business, how consumers, in particular in the post-COVID scenario, they are more and more into buying in a wise way, in a sustainable way. So as a designer, you can implement all of this information. For example, having in your range plan sustainable fabrics that will be part of the range. Then also you will be looking at the data of some of the items that they didn't sell. So then probably those products, they're not going to be part of the new range. And then any sort of reports or numerical data coming from your retailer. So then in this way you have some clear feedback coming from the market. When you're looking at the range plan, beyond the data that you will need to consider, another interesting point is also try to understand if you're building a range plan for a main season, for a main collection, or if you're building a range plan for a pre-collection. And this is very important, in particular, if your strategy is to approach buyers. So let's try to look at some of the key aspects when you're dealing with a range plan for main season, so for main collection. Just to be very practical, main season, main collection is in general the collection where you have the actual fashion show, the runway. So in general, in the range plan for a main collection, you have more exclusive pieces, more special pieces. The design is very particular, is elevated design because obviously you have the fashion show. Looking at the price point, the architecture of the price, you have a mix between mid-price point items and high price point items. In a second, we're going to be discussing the pyramid of fashionability. So then probably it's going to be clear this distinction between mid-price point and high price point. And then also during the days that we're going to be spending in Johannesburg, it's going to be interesting to to meet the designer and really discuss how your price architecture has been done for the ranges that at the moment you're selling. Then in the range plan of a main collection, you also have looking at the fabric allocation that we were discussing before. In general, in main collection, you have special fabric, you have embroidery, you have special decorations that are part of the range. So probably these elements, they will push up your price point. And then you have also, if you're including some non-apparel elements in your range, so accessories, you might be also having some limited edition or special leather that will be included, exotic, that will be included also in your range for a main collection. Looking at the pre-collection range plan, completely different is the mix of the product and the price point. And in general, buyers, they tend to allocate more budget in pre-collections because obviously they have a lower fashionability, but they can guarantee volume of sales, so they can sell quickly your product. So some of the key considerations when you're looking at the range plan of a pre-collection, in general, looking at the products, you have more commercially driven pieces. Looking at the price point, you have a mix between entry price point items and mid price point items. You have a lot of inter-seasonal fabrications. You have more separates, so then your sell-through can be pushed up because obviously you can sell easily separates instead of one look. The designer is simpler, so that's why the price point is more affordable, and pre-collection has a higher sell-through in general than a main collection when you're looking at the performance in the retail environment. And then you can also find non-apparel elements in a range plan for pre-collection and accessories. The price point is more affordable, so then again they can help for positive sell-through when the collections are sold to the retailers. Let's discuss now about these retailers, because all of this strategy, all of this thinking behind the range plan, all of this thinking is mainly done for one main reason. You want to approach buyers, you want to approach retailers. There is a big conversation at the moment, probably you saw also on the Business of Fashion, is wholesale back? Is it true that young designer that can just survive having the online channel? Well, definitely the online is the first step when you're trying to find your brand awareness, brand recognition, but it's also true that when your brand is sold in Harrods, in Selfridges, in Harvey Nichols, in this kind of big retailers, also in the online, Mytheresa, Net-a-Porter, the presence of your brand on these retailers and the channel of these retailers, so offline channels or online channels, definitely it can give visibility, stronger recognition to your brand. So it's true that young designer, they can just sell using the online channel, their own online channel website, but it's also true that you will need retailers and big department stores that somehow they will help you to reinforce the brand awareness and the brand recognition of your brand. So looking at the types of buyers, in general, you can have two buyers, branded buyers and own-label buyers. Considering that most of you are independent young designers, the main focus will be for you on branded designers, so department store and multi-brand stores. The strategy behind the department store and a multi-brand store when they buy you, obviously, the department store, they can give you visibility, they can give you big numbers, and then multi-brand retailers like Matches Fashion, like Joseph. Some of my examples are mainly related to the London market, but I believe also Matches Fashion is a huge online player internationally, so probably you're familiar. It's a sort of Net-a-Porter also for the online, because it is very strong internationally. So having in mind these buyers, key department stores and multi-brand stores, your activity on a seasonal basis will be creating a commercial and profitable and exciting and creative range plan. So then they will buy from you the product and they will be selling. When approaching buyers, which are the key factors to consider? So it's very important that you can find a link between the brand that you're selling and the retailers that you are approaching. So it's very important to reflect on customer. Is the target customer of your brand in line with the target customer of that retailer? Then you will need to think about the key competitors that your brand has, and try to check if one of your retailers that you're dreaming to be in is already selling some of your competitors, because obviously if some of your competitors are already in that retailer, it means that probably the right clientele is going already to that store, to that department store that you want to approach. The positioning in the market, you will need to consider your pricing strategy, and try to understand if your pricing strategy is in line with the pricing strategy of that department store or that multi-brand retailer. And then you will need to check if your design is innovative or traditional, and if it is in line with the current brand mix that the retailer has already in store. Don't forget that buyers, they will never take risk for a young new designer if they can't see that this new adding can be consistent and coherent with the current brand mix available in the store. And then also it's important to have clear what is the spending power of the customers of that specific retailer that you are approaching. So just to make it in a simple way, your brand is in line with the spending power of the Selfridges customer or the Harrods customer. So all of these needs to be checked before approaching buyers. So then the conversation with them will be a sound and confident conversation where you know that your product can fit into the current brand mix of your retailer that you have in mind. And then looking at some details that are more related to the relationship that you will be having with buyers. It's going to be very important to understand what is your delivery windows season by season versus the location of the store. So for example, are you going to make sure that if the store that you are approaching is in a seaside resort, your delivery window for the autumn winter season that is around July, August is in line with the spending power and the customers that are going to that store that is located in a specific area. Then another important conversation that you will need to have with your buyers is how the budget allocation will be done between pre-collection and main collection. I was sharing with you before how the pre-collection is offering in general stronger opportunities for a brand to approach a buyer, because in pre-collection you have more commercially driven pieces, so then you're gonna be sure to sell the product, and then also it's going to be important to have a clear understanding of how much will be the commitment in terms of seasonal budget from the buyer with the number of the SKU that will be bought from that retailer. And then are you gonna try season by season, as soon as the relationship with the buyer with that specific retailer will grow, are you gonna try to build a range that could work for that specific market where you are growing your network of retailers? And then are you gonna try to make sure that there is a clear link between the mix of the sizes that the buyers they will be selecting with your idea of visual merchandising and brand identity that you hope that the retailer will bring into the store, since they will be buying your brand. Looking at the role of the buyer and what I just discussed with you, so it's very important that there is a clear consistency between the target customer of your brand and the target customer of the retailer. Before I was repeating how it is important that you are approaching the right retailer in line with the spending power of that retailer and your brand. You can approach if you're aware that because of the fabrics, because of the special embroidery, your product probably is not going to be in line with the spending power of that specific retailer, probably is not the case to approach that store. So because in the role of the buyer, they will try to find a clear, consistent and effective relationship between who is the target customer of the brand and who is the target customer of the retailer. Looking at the role of the buyer also, don't forget that they have this constant exposure to social media. So then some of the new brands that they might discover, they're also coming from the social media channels, Instagram. Also buyers, they are constantly influenced by those micro and macro changes of the consumer behavior. So all of this is under the big umbrella of the role of the buyer. Let's try now to discuss more about how will be your presence if you are in the department store or if you are in a multi-brand store. So how your brand will be represented. In general, you can have two types of presence when a buyer coming out from a department store or coming from a multi-brand retailer will start buying your brand. So the first one is the concession. So this is one of the most wanted brand representation from young designer, even from big designer, established designers, is the concession inside the department store. So here I try to share with you some images of concessions coming from Harrods and Selfridges. So here, for example, you have the concession of Christopher Kane, Valentino, and Prada. And to have a concession means that the retailer is gonna give you like a space, like a mini shopping area inside the department store, and you will be selling your brand there. So in terms of budget and in terms of commitment from the retailer, definitely from the quantity of products that you can see in a concession is like a proper strong brand representation that you can have in a concession. I have to say though that before a retailer decides for a concession space, in general, they have to see 3-4 seasons where there is a good sell-through. And then in general, it's coming out as a sort of natural conversation where the retailer is proposing to have like a proper concession inside the department store or inside the big multi-brand retailer. The most common form of brand representation when you are bought from buyers is the wholesale. So it's the second option that I'm sharing here, where you have your brand representation on 1, 2, 3 rails. So it means that obviously the budget, the commitment from the buyer is less than a concession. And in general, it's a very good way for penetrating a new market, for establishing a new relationship with a retailer, and then season by season, if the brand is performing, then normally you can move from wholesale brand representation that it's very simple. As you can see here, just a simple representation on a rail if you are an apparel brand, or if you are non-apparel, like just a simple presentation of the bag selection or the accessory selection. And then if this brand representation is performing, is going well, then as a second step, you can move to a concession. Looking at the London market, I wanna share with you like a mini analysis that probably can help you to understand more about how having a clear commercial range plan can help you to approach buyers. So before sharing with you the analysis that is on Gucci, so I try to observe how Gucci one season, so I analyze autumn winter of last year, Gucci is bought in a different way with different product mix from some London retailers. Looking at the London retailers and the environment, I want to give you like a quick overview. So in terms of the retail landscape in London is a mix of everything. You can find flagships or mono brands, you can find the Palm store, concept store. So it's a very magmatic retail landscape. And you can really find different retailers, different spending power of consumers. And the two most important types of retailers are mainly for fashion brands, the department store and multi-brand retailers. There are also different areas in London for shopping. So here I put some areas, so the Bond Street area, the Mount Street, the Brompton and the Oxford Street area with different market levels. And as I said, I try to observe how the same season of Gucci, so autumn winter last year, has been selected from different retailers in a different way with different product mix and different price point. Before discussing the buying mix according to the different retailers, few words on the pyramid of fashionability. So having understood that in the range plan, you will try to develop the most effective mix, commercial and effective and profitable mix of products. You will need also to think about the level of risk that is linked to the price point. So this is the pyramid of fashionability, and I always use this with the students when in the second year in the buying course, we are trying to create a range plan. So I always look at this pyramid because I tell them that when you're planning what you have in your range, you will need to have some entry price point products, and these are called the core, the basic products. They need to be quite a good majority of your collection because they will create sales as soon as the collection will be delivered to the store. Those are the items. Some of them are also bestsellers that they will be repeated from one season to another season. But the core basic pieces, they will help you to convince the buyers that you are a good brand to have in the store. The core pieces, they might not be very creative, but they bring you sales. And when they bring you sales, means that you will have happy retailers, happy buyers. And if buyers, they're happy about the performance of your brand, they will come back next season, they will invest in your collection, and the relationship with that buyer will grow. Then you will need to have some items that they will be having a bit of a higher level of risk. And the risk is from the perspective of the buyer, basically. So the risk is not to sell. And in those mid-price point fashion items, you will be having some element of fashion, maybe coming from the seasonal trends. You will have a slight increase of the price point. Those pieces, they will create the initial element of surprise and creativity. They will be different season from season. And then after them, you will need a small group of items that they will be sitting in the high fashion items. There, the level of risk is higher. Again, the level of risk is linked to the fact of not selling the product. And then in the high fashion pieces, you will be playing with a higher price point. That's why, sorry, I need to move this. That's why when you're looking at the margin, for those items that you're sure that you can sell, you can play with a lower margin in your price point. With those items that are in the fashion level, so the mid-price point, you will be raise your margin because you're not sure how many units you can sell. And then for the high fashion, those are the risky pieces. They are amazing from a creative perspective, but you don't know how many of them you will be able to sell. You have also a small number of them because they are in the point of the pyramid. So there you will be playing in a safe way your match. So you're going to be increasing your margin at the top, 70-75%. So even if you're not selling many units, at least you play with a high margin, so you will be able to get money in. maybe later when I'm gonna be there with Massimo, and we're gonna be looking to the price point and your mix of product, then we can have a discussion about this. And then before concluding, I'm gonna be sharing then the different pyramids, as I was anticipating, of the Gucci brand, how I observed the buying of one season, so same season, autumn winter last year, of Gucci in different retailers. So this is, for example, how Harrods was buying Gucci. So I'm asking you here maybe to have a look at the price point and the product mix. So as you could see, a very good proportion of the buying was in the entry price point. And then some items were in the mid price point up to 2,000. And then the exit price point was 26,000. Same season, completely different to the buying in Selfridges. As you could see, it's a safer buying, having mainly entry price point and mid price point. And then the last pyramid, Net-a-Porter, the buying was less safe than Selfridges because they also included some exit price point items. And in the entry price point up to 700 and mid price point up to 5,000. So all of these for telling you that building an effective range plan can help the buyers at this stage. So when they are selecting, when they are building the selection for the store, because obviously in the selection, they will include just the items that they think that they can sell in line with the spending power of their consumers. That's it from my side about how to build an effective range plan. And I look forward to meet you, maybe to discuss more in details about your range plan, your costing, your margin, how you play with your margin in the pyramid of fashionability. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Well, thank you very, very much, both of you. Very interesting and presentation. I certainly learned a lot, but that's not saying very much. And we look forward to seeing you there. For the designers that are going to be at the show, as Sinait and Massimo have mentioned a number of times, they are going to be there to have one-on-one workshops with you to discuss what they've covered now in a bit more detail. So we do look forward to seeing you there. I've shared Hanali's details you would have seen. We are going to have to wrap up now. I saw Massimo did respond to some of the questions. If there are any outstanding questions, you can get in touch with us afterwards.
Yes, if I can interrupt you, I pressed send before I could finish the question about color. So what I was saying, Armani, yes, he's famous for his grays and beiges. So you don't necessarily have to have a colorful collection, but what you can do is maybe if there's a color that comes in the season, you can have one or two items which reflect that color. But if you want to focus just on a neutral color palette, that's absolutely fine. It's worked for Donna Karan, it's worked for Calvin Klein, it works for Armani. So like I'm saying, don't feel the pressure of having to go with what is out there. Focus on yourself as a brand.
Great. And we do have another webinar coming up next week, Wednesday at 3 o'clock, how to get your products into stores. We've got the head buyer from